So let's first talk about DACPack. So DACPack is, as it says, a single unit zip file, .dacpac, for authoring, deploying, and managing data to your objects. So it's actually schema plus data now with DACPack. So the idea is that there's two sort of use cases for this, that there's the developer side in Visual Studio where you can create or edit these DACPacks. And this is for your application developers who are front-ending to a database, and they are either working with an existing database, either on-premise with the idea of migrating to the cloud, or they have a cloud database and they need to create a front-end application, another one for it. So they can generate a DAC, which will generate the schema, or they can use an existing one. Or they can do a schema comparison for a DAC on-prem versus in the cloud. Now, for the DBAs of the world, you can work with DACs in Management Studio. You can extract a DAC, which is very similar to Generate Script Wizard. How it's different is it includes more of the policy and login information. Okay? Another thing is with R2, there is an on-prem capability called a Utility Access Control Server or point, where DBAs can monitor DACPacks for changes. So it's lifecycle management. So note here, if you're registering existing databases as DACs, if it's regular, it's into MSDB. If it's Azure, it's into master. If you're using this utility control point, it's into the UCP database. Now, you probably, if you're like many of the people I've talked to about this, wanting to see a demo, because most of the customers I've seen haven't had the chance to take a look at it. So let's first look at DACPacks in terms of what you get on-prem in SQL Management Studio, and then we'll look at it a little bit more. So let's close this window for clarity and go over to an on-prem database. And let's pick Dating Game again, just one we're kind of familiar with. And let's say task, extract, notice, or register. Okay? So we're going to say extract, and that's going to pull up a wizard. And you need to configure the properties, review the object dependencies, and build the DAC. So I say set, and then I've done this like a lot of times, so I have to give it a new name. So let's call it Dating Game, Dating Game 700 today. And notice it's a DACPack extension, and I'll say save. And then I can say next. And it's checking for object dependencies. And now it's showing which objects are supported. Now, I've heard from a lot of customers that they were underwhelmed by DACPacks because not all features of on-premise SQL Server are supported for object generation in DACPacks. An interesting fact, though, is all features of SQL Azure are supported. So that's something to know, particularly around migration scenarios for into SQL Azure. So I say next, and then we build this package. And it will generate the script. Now, notice I can also, on my cloud-based instance, right-click on the Dating Game here. And once it takes a minute to render, on tasks, I can extract this thing as a data to your application. So as I had said, if you're a DBA and you're wanting to make a schema comparison between a cloud-based instance and an on-prem instance that maybe your developers are developing against, you can extract or register DACPacks. So that is in Management Studio. And now if I go to Visual Studio 2010, I'll show you a bit how it works inside of here. So if I say File, New, Project, and then I am on the database project type, SQL Server template, and I say SQL Server data to your application, and I say OK. And it'll take a minute to generate the template, and you'll see that if I expand this out, that under Schema Objects, I don't have anything under Schemas, under DBO, because I haven't either imported a DACPack or generated a DACPack schema. So if I right-click here and I say I could import a script directly, but I could also import a data to your application. And I could say next. And notice I can import it from on-prem if I wanted to, including the server selection policy, or interestingly, I can import it from a cloud-based instance. So I've actually set this up already, so I don't have to type the credentials. This is yet another instance that I have. And I'll pick, once again, this dating game database that we're becoming so familiar with. And I'll say next. And now I'm connecting in Visual Studio to SQL Azure. The use case for this is I'm a developer, and there is an existing SQL Azure database for which I need to understand the schema so that I can create a new type of front-end application to either view the data or work with the data. And so now it is, again, checking and validating the object dependencies, and it will be generating the DAC pack for me to work with inside of Visual Studio. And as this is cooking, you can see on the right, we got data generation plans, schema comparison, because one of the features I probably won't have time to show in this webcast is how you do schema comparison. One of our community MVPs has done a great job with all the features of DAC packs, Denny Cherry. I recommend that you take a look if you're intrigued by DAC packs for migration or just as a feature set to get a fuller view of DAC packs. And there it's showing you what objects are supported. Notice that I have the tables, I have the schemas, and I have the logins and roles. One of the important considerations around DAC packs, I know a lot of people ask about security and compliance when we're talking about the cloud. We introduced this capability on-prem to have policies in SQL Server to create collections of security settings, including auditing. And it's a feature I haven't seen a lot of customers taking advantage of, and I'd really recommend it, number one, because it enables easier management, and it's conceptually similar to network management policies. Secondly, because our tooling and our roadmap for cloud-based computing supports the transfer of policies. It's not fully enabled right now, but that's the idea or the roadmap, that once you have these policies set up on-prem, you can move them in addition to the schema and data with the DAC pack capability. So I'm going to say next, and now it's going to generate the scripts. And of course, it is opened this DAC pack. So if I open Schema Objects now, I go inside of Schemas, notice here's the good old boyfriends table. And there it is. And again, notice I don't have an on primary because this is a SQL Azure instance. Now again, we've got a lot of formality here. We have each column being collated under the default, which you might want to remove some of this, verbose text, but that's the way it generates. Notice also over on the right side, you have your indexes, your views, so on and so forth. And you have the ability to include scripts for pre- and post-deployment. And as I said, you have schema comparison, which we won't really have time to do. But once we're done and good with this, then we could, of course, add new SQL objects here. If we are on-prem, we could be working with master or MSDB. Notice we have the ability to import or export partial. So if we are trying to have on-prem versus SQL Azure and we had different features that we wanted to make available, we could do that, and so on and so forth. So the sort of big takeaway here is life cycle management. Life cycle management, which is a really important part of migration. So now that we've seen a little bit about DAC pack, maybe it makes more sense that we're extending DAC pack into the migration scenario by including the BCP capability. So talked about everything on this slide. And there I did the demo and talked about both environments. And I showed you that as well. All right. So I talked about schema management. I talked about trial migrations. It's time to really talk about large data, production levels of data. And I got a lot of information here from the SQL CAT or Customer Advisory team because they are the ones out there working with our early adopting and our customers coming onto the cloud platform and providing support to the customers with very large data scenarios. So really important to use the right tool. BCP is sometimes, it's a manual tool, but sometimes what you need. I personally will tend to use SSIS or integration services because of the rich set of features and because I'm comfortable in that environment. But those are our key tools. So some best practices around BCP and bulk copy. This is really not new information. This is well known for just general data migration, but it becomes incredibly more important when you're transferring large amounts of data into the cloud, particularly a one-time large migration. You may know that the way that you incur charges for the use of SQL Azure is how much data is stored and how much data is transferred in and out, ingress and egress. Of course, there is no SQL Server licenses or anything, so it's a different kind of charge. And of course, you want to minimize latency, just from a practical point. So some really good tips here. Disable and delay your creation of it should be non-clustered indexes, not none there. That's a typo. Order data on the clustered index. Disable triggers and constraints. If you are going from SQL Server to SQL Azure, then you can have a native mode, so there's no data type conversion check. Character mode for interoperability if you're not. Batch size is going to control the transaction size, very important. And then the -H is a tab lock order optimizing your writes. So just some things that are well known but good to remember when you're using BCP. You can use the import-export wizard in SQL Server Migration Studio to quickly create a prototype SSIS package. But, of course, you'll probably then take that into the Business Intelligence Development Studio to have finer grain control, error handling, transactions, so on and so forth. So the workhorse in integration services is the data flow. So, of course, you can connect to and from sources other than relational. Everything is programmable. If you're not familiar and you have a large migration, I really recommend that you gain some familiarity. I know that one of my co-authors of my BI book, my second BI book, David Marie from Italy, has created a webcast series. Also, my book, Smart Business Intelligence Solutions with SQL Server 2008, contains 6 chapters on the use of SSIS out of a 27-chapter book, so that you might find that helpful. Again, some of the things that we heard in the last slide are good practice here. Disable and delay creation of, looks like somebody corrected this for me, non-clustered indices, order data on the clustered index. You want to disable constraints and triggers, and you want to adjust the transaction batch size. You want to take a look at the size of blobs if you have them. You might actually consider Windows Azure blob storage rather than storing them in SQL Azure, because that's a type of storage that you might want to use rather than the storage in SQL Azure. So you also, of course, in SSIS can use parallelization depending on the capability of the hardware that you have. So let me switch out and show you a demo of this. So let me go into, close this out, and use Business Intelligence Development Studio.